This is George Bernard Shaw. This is the influential playwright and one of the best people in the entire world in terms of literature standards. In fact, he was so great that he was given the Nobel Prize in Literature, and he was even given the Oscar for the best screenplays. Let's get this life started with. Firstly, let's start off with this. He was born on July 26th of 1856 in Portobello, which is in Dublin, which is in Ireland. And he was the youngest child, and he was the only son of George Carr Shaw. So he has, George Carr Shaw, and towards his mother, Lucinda Elizabeth, who's also known as Bessie. Now, these are two most influential. She is one of the most influential people in his life. From 1865 to 1871, he would go ahead and attend several schools, and he went to 4 of them, in fact, and every one of them he hated, even describing it as like a little prison to keep children in so that they won't need to chaperone their parents and things like that. And in all due honesty, I feel like back then it did really feel like that. Nowadays, those schools like awesome. On October of 1871, he left school and he went to become a junior clerk at a land firm. Where he would be one of the land agents. He became the clerk, and he worked hard, and he quickly rose to the position of head clerk, which is in by itself a very big major success. One day, his mother's boyfriend, Lee, who he was pretty close with, mostly because of music, he left for London and he had never returned. A fortnight later, his mother went and joined Lee, and he stayed behind with his dad back in Dublin. In 1876, he would go ahead and quit the land firm, and he joined his mother all the way in London. And it is here, that is in London, that he was able to get some sort of job or something like that. He did have no salary, he had no job that he could think of or rely on whatsoever, and his mother would let him go ahead and stay at the home for free of charge. But that obviously not work eventually, and he would need to get a job. Lee was able to go ahead and help him get a job as like a ghostwriter. And as a ghostwriter, he was able to go ahead and write several things for several famous people, and he was able to earn some decent money from it. And as a result, afterwards, he would have to go ahead and join. He would later go ahead and go for office jobs, and as shown right here. It was around this time that he went ahead and started meeting some early British socialists. You might have even heard of one of them. He met Beatrice Potter. And Beatrice Potter, the one who wrote The Tales of Peter Rabbit. And then one day, while he was working for the Edison Telephone Company, he would go ahead and meet a bunch more of them. Beatrice Potter, that I just mentioned, being one of those people. He'll later go ahead and join them in their meetings and such and such. Later on in life, he would go ahead and join the Fabian Society. It was Fabian Society, and it was here that I was able to go ahead and meet the famous theater critic William Archer. And William Archer himself was the one who helped him get a job as a critic, which he would be one for a few years. He would eventually become like a music critic. In fact, he was even able to get a job as like a critic in the sense of he became an art critic for the World in 1886 to 1890. He became a music critic for the Star under the pseudonym of the so-called Corno di Bassetto. He was a music critic, and later again he became another music critic for the World once again, where he became writing as like a GBS. It was during this time period that he started writing a bunch of plays, and he even was able to write a few novels. He wrote 5 of them, 4 of which were published serialized versions. And then in the 1890s, he would go ahead and start writing a bunch of plays, but it wasn't, I should probably also mention that in 1898 that he married a woman named Charlotte Payne Townshend, where he would go ahead and live for the rest of their lives. In 1910, and it was during this time that he also got to write the best of his plays, one of them being Pygmalion. Now, Pygmalion itself is one of the most influential plays ever, and I would go deep and in about how it will be one of the most influential plays, one of the most hard-earning plays for Bernard Shaw himself. In fact, this play itself and its adaptations earned more money for the Shaw estate than any of his other plays. But I'll talk more about that in the review video when I get around reading to Pygmalion. This is around the 19s, early 20th century now, and this is in 1925, and this is where he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. Afterwards, in 1933, 8 years after getting the Nobel Prize, he would go travel around the world, he himself going to places like India, Hong Kong, China, Japan, and the United States of America. Afterwards, he wrote a screenplay for an adaptation of his own story of Pygmalion, and he got the Oscars award of Best Original Screenplay. Original mostly because he was the one who wrote the text that it was based on. And it was around this time in 1943 that Charlotte died. Afterwards, she was cremated and her ashes was sprinkled all around the lawn on the lawn that he lived in. And on his 90th birthday, Bernard Shaw was given the freedom of Dublin and the borough of the St. Panels. And then afterwards, in 1950, which would be his, he was 1950 minus 1856, that is, let's see, 4, this is 4, this is 9, 94 years old, he would go ahead and die. He himself was also cremated as a result, and his ashes were also sprinkled along with his wife's. He was never buried, which explains why there's no gravestone whenever I searched for him online, but to this day, the Shaw estate still remains, and potentially his ashes are still in the ground there somewhere. But good luck collecting them, because they're ashes. You can just take out ashes from your fireplace and try to prove they're Bernard Shaw. It is not going to work. And that is it. That is the life and story of George Bernard Shaw. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Hanjin Shun. I hope to see you guys soon. Until next time, Shihana, peace. Bye bye.